Sharp Chat. Sharp Chat.
Well, we are here at the Barbershop Harmony Society Midwinter Convention in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee, at the Gaylord Opry Convention and Hotel, and we have some fantastic guests with us today. Here we have our 2009 International Gold Medal champions, Crossroads. Thanks for being with us, guys.
Yay!
Thanks for having us.
Say, open the gate, well, I can hardly wait for that great blessed morning. Gonna go and fly, I'm ready for that sweet by and by, the land up above in the sky. By and by.
Not too shabby. Well, thank you very much, guys. So I think one question that a lot of barbershoppers would have, each of you obviously had tremendous success in quartets before Crossroads came together.
3 out of the 4.
And you know, the road to competition can be, you know, a challenging road and a very tense road for some people. So what made each of you decide, hey, let's go for another gold medal? What made you decide you wanted to get back into a competitive quartet? Mike, we'll start with you.
Well, actually, when this quartet started, it wasn't to be a competition quartet.
Mm-hmm.
We actually talked when we first got together about not competing. But, you know, then after discussing it, we thought, well, that's really the only way, you know, when you're competing is the only way to kind of get your name out there. And, you know, we really wanted to just kind of be together. We were friends before we got together, and so we just wanted to continue that friendship and, you know, sing with each other. And then the competition thing kind of happened after.
Sure. Yeah, Jim, how about for you? What was your perspective?
Well, pretty much what Mike said. I think it was more of an organic thing. It wasn't a group of guys who said, let's get together and be in a competitive quartet and compete. It was just sort of like, we used to sing together at conventions. So I'm told, I don't remember it. But they tell me that we used to sing together at conventions a lot. No, we did. And we're just really, really good friends. And of course, after Rob passed away, Mike and Brandon both sang baritone at various times. I've known Fred since we were kids practically. And Mike I've known a long time. I met Brandon when he did a tour with the Guest House Gang in Japan, and just fell in love with him and his family. And we just really found ourselves as 4 friends, none of us having a quartet. And it really was just kind of a thing like, wouldn't it be fun for us to just see what kind of music we could make together? And I really think that's how it started. And as Mike said, we did discuss maybe not doing competition at all.
Right.
I don't think any of us cared or lived for that, but it was more a decision of just letting the world know that we exist.
Sure.
You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, we were really honored, you know, to win and very proud of the competition. But I think that whether we'd competed or not, we'd still be together singing. You know?
Brandon, how about for you?
Well, it's definitely the Gas House Gang. I mean, that certainly, as Jim said, was the bond between us all. I mean, you know each other through conventions and just idolizing each other from afar, and you know you see each other once or twice a year, and we grew fond of each other. But I'll never forget hearing Mike sing, and 4 Voices and Power Play were kind of competing right alongside each other, and this is no disrespect to any other quartets we were competing against, but they were always the quartet that I wanted to make sure I was in the arena to watch, and it's to hear Mike sing because I just was such a fan of his lead. But really more than that was just who he was as a person. I'll never forget in our first or second competition, I can't remember, Nashville, so it would have been our second one. We were sitting in the lobby, still very new, and we were, and particularly 2 of our members didn't know a lot of people. They weren't barbershoppers per se. And Mike cut his way, and they were 3rd place medalists at the time, and we were just nobodies. He cut his way through this busy crowd, you know, having to fight off adoring fans,
Right.
mostly men, no women. And he just came over and was just gushing, talking about how much he loved us,
Right.
and was just being so kind. And it just speaks to the kind of person he was. So that was...
That's past
He
tense.
was, yeah. So there was that, and then obviously when I began to sing with the Gas House Gang, we did that tour, and I brought my wife, and we became very close. So we never really, even through all that time, ever talked about singing together, but I think it was always in the back of our minds that this would be the next thing. And then when we found ourselves at that point, Mike and I had talked about it, and Jim had told Gita that after the Gas House Gang, because they had 17, 18 years of being gone 25, 30 weekends, as you do, and he told Gita, right, that you're
Yeah,
done.
I mean, my agreement with my wife was, let's just devote time now to the family. And I remember at one point Gita saying, long before this was even a thought in anybody's mind, Gita said, Jim, the only guys that, I'd be okay if if you wanted to sing with, if you sang with Fred and Mike and Brandon, she said I could be okay with that because I just love their wives, love them, and it would just be kind of fun.
That's actually the public story. The private story is once she experienced 27 weekends with you at home.
Right,
she was
please
desperate to
find
find
another
out.
way out, anything.
Anybody sing with her, please. So,
One of that neighbor guy.
And one of my favorite memories of Fred is I didn't know Fred really at all because, he was sort of in and out of the barbershop scene. Sort of in Florida he was, but we started going to the Labor Day Jamboree, the famous Labor Day Jamboree, and Chad and I were really young kids, and I'll never forget this. We walked into the penthouse at the Innisbrook Resort there, and Fred's standing in the corner, and Jamie was there, and he was singing tags. I don't even remember who. And we were like, there's second edition. So we walk over there just wanting to be a fly on the wall, and Fred rips this high B flat. And just, as he does, and he goes, I don't know how that sounded, but it sure felt good. And that's sort of been our Crossroads motto, I think, ever since.
well, Fred, I'm especially interested in your answer because you had the longest span of time from your first quartet. Not that you weren't in some other quartets, but even then there was a pretty big gap of time. So what got the fire lit back for you to get back to a quartet?
Well, I tell you, I was it was kind of out of left field. I wasn't looking to be in a quartet. In fact, it was kind of a weird thing for me. Second edition was pretty short-lived, and we were a very young quartet, and we were done when I was 24.
Right.
And I moved to Florida for work, and started raising kids, and was part of a startup company that was consuming a lot of time, and I was just really far away from barbershop for the most part. And I always felt, though, that I had one more in me. I mean, I felt like that was so short-lived, and I was still so young, and I was still in, kind of my prime, if you will. And one morning at work, on a Monday morning, I get a phone call out of the blue from these three guys, and I'm just neck deep in work and busy, and they asked me if I would be interested in coming up and seeing how it sounds, and I literally sat back and I said, okay, the last thing in my mind right now is a quartet, but if I'm ever going to sing again, this would be my dream quartet. I mean, I can't pass this up. And, in a lot of ways, it turned out to be, I may be overstating a bit, but, in some ways I think it saved my life because I was so focused on work. I was coming home at 7, 8 o'clock at night.
Right.
I was snapping at the kids. I was just not living a well-rounded life. And this changed all of that, put everything in perspective, and it brought that joy in my life again. And the rest is history. I didn't have a burning desire to win another gold medal or to compete again necessarily, but that's always kind of the fun part of it as well. I enjoy it, but yeah, it was not a big thing on my list to check off that I needed another gold medal. And one real quick story, going into international, our first international, we had, there was a lot of hype with 4 gold medalists and so forth. I think Max Q kind of experienced a little bit of that. It's like, how do we ever live up to with the expectations to some degree? And we were tense and nervous, and in fact, didn't sing well in our first prelims, and Metropolis beat us in our very first prelims. So, it wasn't quite living up to that hype necessarily right out of the gate, but literally right before we went on stage for our first round in 08, Mike turned to us and said, guys, we've already got everything we want. And it literally, this weight lifted off all of us individually and collectively. It's like, truly, we're with our friends, we're having the time of our life, and there's nothing that could detract from that, and there's just no point in putting undue pressure on ourselves for competition reasons, and it changed. Literally, it stuck with us from that point on, and it just took the pressure off of us, and we enjoyed so much more every performance we ever did, in competition even. So, yeah, it came along at a really great time. Wasn't expected for me at all, but it sure was a blessing from above in so many ways.
And the nice thing that with regard to Fred, that Brandon says often is that when Fred was singing with Second Edition, he didn't have his kids. Maybe you had not even Olivia was.
Yeah.
And so none of his kids, they all grew up not knowing what an amazing singer he was. And so was past tense again. But I think Crossroads gave Fred an opportunity, for his kids to be able to see what an amazing, not only what amazing man he is, which he is, but also what an amazing singer he is.
And speaking of the kids, I think that's something that we didn't really know would happen in the beginning, but has been such a joy, is that our families, all of our children, as soon as we got them together, they just immediately glued and gelled in really special ways. There's tag singing, and your kids, I don't think at the time when we first started were really sort of into music per se.
Didn't really know we weren't tag singing around the house or anything.
Right.
Like
It just
didn't know what to
lit
expect.
a fire.
Yeah.
Went international
And when we first got together, it wasn't just the four of us, but we brought our wives too. We just made sure that we talked to everybody about this and just said, is everybody good with this? Because if one person wasn't, then that was it. We wouldn't do it.
Now, the great advantage to putting this quartet together is you all already have a tremendous amount of experience, but that can also be an obstacle because you've gotten used to singing the certain way you had to in your previous quartet. So I'm curious for each of you, what was the biggest adjustment, if any, that you had to make in this quartet? We'll start with you, Fred.
Well, it was very different, and these guys. I should probably let one of these guys tell the story because I wasn't there. I don't even know if I was in their top 10 as first tenors, But they got together, the three of them.
You remember that morning, that phone call?
Yes,
We called him right after
I had too many
you
obligations.
said no.
Remember you said
You
no.
said no. He was the next phone
You
call.
and 19 other people said no.
Bob Dowman wasn't available. I mean, there was a long.
We started calling tenors on a Sunday.
That's right.
Monday morning.
Monday morning.
We
finally
asked
landed at
Vern Reed, and even he rolled over and said no.
It wasn't, magical right out of the gate by any stretch. And for their very first rehearsal was actually with Tim Warwick. Not that Tim was ever going to intend to be in the quartet.
Just
but
a placeholder.
Yeah. And they tell the story of everybody getting together and listening to this new group. Some folks
All of
from
our
St. Louis
wives
came over, and anticipating this
David Wright
incredible
was there.
sound, and they started singing, and everybody kind of slowly drifted away. And we better let him work. They got a long way to go. But we did have an incredible kind of a watershed coaching session with Gene Barford in the spring of '08. I think it was before our prelim, but she really helped us find our sound, and it was a lot of adjustment, particularly for Jim and Mike. Very different from the way they sang with their old quartets and so forth. So it was work. It was a lot of adjustment, but once we found it, it was it worked. It just magic.
Brandon, how about for you? You singing baritone with very much a buzzsaw bass in four voices, and then Jim, who has such a big voice. What were some of the adjustments you had to make?
Well, interestingly, I think, and Jim can certainly speak to this too, but having sung with the Gashouse Gang and Four Voices, I think Jim Gashouse Gang is a much brighter bass than Crossroads Jim. And so when I sing with Gashouse Gang, and through those periods of time, it was much closer to what I was used to. Now, even at that point, Jim still sang with much more, I think, openness than JB did. But so it was interesting because when we would sing together in Gashouse Gang, it's a much brighter sound, a little closer to what I'm used to.
Right.
But when we came together with Mike, the dynamic really shifted because Mike just sings, so open all the time. So there was a lot of just, where is this between all of us? And I think Jim and I certainly had to sing with a lot more just openness and depth in the sound. And it was difficult. I remember we did this show with Ben Ailing at his university, at Kent State University, and we stayed in his home and we had a great time, but we were just singing all these songs. We had Little Patch of Heaven and a few other things, mostly things that were not arranged for us. standing around his pool table just rehearsing it time and time again, and we just couldn't find it. It just was elusive. We couldn't
Right.
find where it was. You hit it occasionally, but it was, I don't want to say frustrating, but it was a little bit. We were just saying, we look forward to the day where we can open our mouth and we all know where it lives.
Right.
And it took a long time. It really did.
And Jim, how about for you? Sounds like this is where a lot of the adjustments really had to start taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Brandon says, I'm always interested to hear people describe the differences of any of our voices, because in my mind, I had one guy told me that I sing brighter with this quartet, but I never think about singing brighter. I really had to sing, I had to find my lift and my space. Jean Barford, as Fred said, was really an important figure in our lives for that reason. She was just amazing with us, and we just love her. Every time we see her, we thank her, because I think she really was the one that sort of offered the conduit for our sound, and it wasn't long and drawn out. She just heard us and just made a few adjustments, and all of a sudden it was just clicking. And then the goal was just to try to stay there. So we thank her a lot for that. But yeah, I feel like to match Mike, I had to really heighten the sound, lift the sound, get a lot more resonance, sing a little flatter in general.
Yeah, scooping. Way more scooping.
Mission accomplished.
A lot less facial expression.
Yeah.
You're overachieving.
And we just decided vowels aren't important
That's
anymore.
right.
It's really freeing in a lot of ways. Not worry about pitch, vowels, tone quality.
Well, that's I think for all barbershoppers at all levels, it's I think important for average guys like me to hear champs and heroes like you go through the same process of you've got to get coaching, and you've got to be willing to accept it, and you've got to be willing to trust that even though it doesn't feel like it's always felt, it's better.
Yeah.
And the fact that you guys were willing to go through that process, which had to be difficult to achieve the great sound that you have, I think should be instructive for all of us as we're trying to improve. So I wanted to ask you about your signature song, "Lucky Old Son." It's obviously a magnificent arrangement, but it was clear seeing you all sing it on the contest stage that there was more to this song than just the notes and the chords. There was something about the message of the song that resonated with you guys, and I think a lot of us would be curious, what is it exactly about that song that had such an impact on you guys?
You want to answer that?
Well, I mean, I first heard it as a Vern Reed solo with the Buffalo Bills, and to hear Vern sing it, I mean, it's, I think it speaks to everyday people in all walks of life having struggles, but there's hope, and we don't hide the fact that our faith is a big part of who we are, and so songs like that we can really express that are just, they're magnets to us, and David did just an amazing job of arranging with to allow us to do that. And I remember we got it shortly before our trip to Finland. We were doing a music festival in Finland, and it's
And
one
that
of
was
these.
just a month or so before the contest.
Yeah.
It's like late May.
But it just, I mean, it just came together so quickly because of that, because of obviously a great arrangement, and it fit our voices very well. But the message, I mean, we learned it and sang it on different performances there in Finland, and just because we could relate, I think everybody can relate to that song.
Right. And you all have made the decision, that's pretty much a standard show closer for you guys, right? I'm always curious when people are meeting you on the way out of the show, what kinds of feedback do you get from people? Do people single out that song? Do you find that it touches a lot of people, or is it just more the overall performance that seems to have an impact on audiences? Or have they long since gone asleep? I mean, that would be the other
Right.
option we
No,
would certainly have to
We get
put in
mostly
there.
that.
I think it varies. I mean, it's amazing, how certain people gravitate toward the more funny things that we
Right.
do. Some people gravitate toward the more deep things. And I think it's one of the challenges with a song like that, although I think it's different for each of us, but we've been singing it for 10 years. And so it's easy sometimes to sort of go into autopilot mode and to really try to continually find new messages. You know, I was thinking about when you were talking about the international performance. For me, what I was thinking about from the very first notes, and it was really the emotion that drove it for me, as soon as Mike started singing, I just remember closing my eyes and saying, "Thank you, Lord, for putting Mike Slamke in my life." That's the truth. That's what I was thinking.
I felt the same exact way.
And then as we were singing that song, that was my emotion. It was just, I'm here with these guys, and what a blessing. And so that was what I was focused on. I wasn't thinking about the pain and struggles of life. I'm just thinking about what a joy to be able to be here and to do this. So it's always, you know, over 10 years that comes and goes, and the emotions are different in different performances. Last night obviously was very different, but you know, it's just interesting to see how people connect with certain things that we do.
It's amazing because I had the exact same thought. The moment Mike started singing, all the contest stuff, it all kind of went away, and it was more about just like, wow, look at these guys. Look how good Mike Slamke is, and listen to the heart of that guy, and just what a blessing it is to sing with these guys. That was my pervasive thought through the whole song.
When you got to the end, I was like, I'm not sure the intro.
What about you,
It's like, hold it all the way to the end. Make sure, Mike, you hold it all the way to the end.
I think as Mike started singing, I remember distinctly thinking, hey, that's O.C. Times in the front row.
That's cool. That should be it.
Well, I can tell you, as an audience member, it was one of those rare moments where you feel like the entire world has gone silent and still as soon as you started that song. And I don't know if you all felt that on stage, but it was like something big's about to happen here, just as an audience member.
I
It
think
was
we
a
all felt
transcendent experience as a performer. You know, I cry at the drop of a hat, but I remember losing control emotionally. After we got off stage, we were walking toward a webcast interview or something like that, and I just started crying uncontrollably. It was a moving experience. And for years after that, we experienced the same thing. And you know, honestly, you know, we're looking for a new closer. We'd love to find some fresh, but we haven't been able to find anything that we can relate to.
Right.
We just can't find anything better. And as long as we still love to sing it, and still, you know, I think people, a lot of the feedback we get, and I think probably the feedback we're most proud of, is the genuineness of us comes across, and that's a great vehicle for us because it's genuine. Everything is genuine here. I mean, we aren't doing anything for the wrong reasons, and I think that comes across when we sing that song.
Yeah.
And I think it's an intangible in a lot of ways, but I think that's what the audiences tend to appreciate about us more than anything. You know, we might not always land the tag, or we might not do the best job performing it, but the emotion and the you know, the spirit of it is always there. So
Yeah,
it's true.
I remember when you guys came to perform at Harmony U, you know, you're winding up your year as champs. And I just remember sitting there in the audience, and every song you sang, you got a standing O. And it was just so neat because you could see appreciative people who were fans of your music, but just more than that, just fans of you and wanted you to know that. And I just remember just thinking about what a neat thing it is to witness an audience just pour love out on a quartet.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And I think for all of us, because we all started singing barbershop young, and, you know, 3 of us are second, in Mike's case, 3rd generation barbershop singers. So when you're a kid growing up in barbershop, you're not thinking that these kinds of things are ever going to happen to you. You're just admiring all the people that, you know. So I think that it's never lost on us, you know, that this is a dream that I don't think I actually had. I mean, people say I'm living, you know, my dream has come true. I would never have dreamed all of this. I mean, I didn't have the imagination to dream all of this. So I am so, so, so blessed to make music in any context, no matter what kind of music, but to have a life where you make music for people is a really blessed life. And if you are also blessed to do that in front of beautiful people like barbershop singers tend to be, and then to stand side by side with other people who are beautiful people. That's something that you don't even dare dream as a kid, but you sure appreciate it while it's happening.
Talking about dreams, I've told this story before, but the very first barbershop performance, I was a sophomore in high school. A guy walked into our high school class, and our music teacher gave him the whole day, or the whole period, and said, I'm going to talk to you about this thing called barbershop. Never knew what it was. But instead of me talking, I'm going to show you. He pushes a VHS into the VCR player. The first thing I saw was the Gas House Gang singing the jockey set. Now, if you would have said to that kid...
That was a beautiful performance.
It was followed
Moving,
up by...
very moving.
I was like, that's the best thing I ever saw. And then immediately after that was Keepsake. And I'm like, no, that's better. But if you would have... And then we idolize, as you do. If you would have said to that 15, 16-year-old kid that one day you're going to be singing... That's a dream, as you said, that I could never have imagined. It's unbelievable.
Well, one
You're
last
welcome.
question for you. One last question. What's on tap for 2019? What are the big things for Crossroads coming up this year?
Wow.
We're breaking up.
I see.
Announcing it here.
I'm
It's been a great run.
retiling my roof.
Very good. Very good. And
No,
we
we're going to be singing at the Babs convention in May, I think, in Bournemouth.
The real group is going to be there as the headliners, but they couldn't be there all weekend, so Babs is just bringing us over to sing on Sunday.
Oh, wow.
So we get to listen to the real group all weekend and then sing a few
And
songs
then
on
sing.
Sunday. That's not a bad deal.
That's
Right.
And then, of course, England, but before that, Viborg, South Dakota.
That's true.
Oh.
And that's no small thing. I mean, you have not made it to
It's a
something
small town.
It is amazing.
But an incredible place to have a show. I don't know if you ever did
Yeah.
the Viborg, South Dakota show, but when PowerPlay did it, we pulled in and it said population 762, and we thought, oh gosh, how are they going to have a show? And then you get there and the 1,500 people show up. You think,
Yeah.
from where?
No, we have a lot
So,
more
yeah.
performances. We, you know.
Probably not
New-
much
new
to do
music.
there in the middle of South Dakota, so this is a time to get out and have some fun for a change. Very good.
Yeah, we actually get to sing with the Fairfield Four again in a few months.
Oh, yeah.
At a I guess it's a conference or a festival. It's kind of extending what we've been doing with them, and I guess in recognition of African American roots and harmony and in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. I'm not exactly sure the dates right now, but that's another thing we're really looking forward to as well. Is getting anytime we get to see those guys and be with them and singing with them is great too, but just being with them is wonderful.
Yeah.
But that's going to happen this year too. So that's cool.
Well, the affection and admiration between you all both is very evident, as is the great affection all of us as barbershoppers have for you guys, for your music, and even more importantly for the kind of people you are. So thank you for taking time to be with us today. Here at Shop Chat, we have a little tag that we like to ask our guests to send us out with. So would you guys like to close us up today?
Shop Chat.
Well, that's Crossroads, and that's Shop Chat. Thanks for tuning in.
A nice, comfortable key.